The purpose of this video series is to share techniques we have learned and used at Downeast Institute to help municipal shellfish committees enhance clam flats affordably and effectively. DEI was created to help sustain Maine's softshell clam resource. Providing seeds to towns is only one of the ways we do that. We think getting the right tools into the hands of shellfish committees can help the industry now and in the future.
Throughout the previous 6 videos in this series, we walked you through how to apply for an LPA, how to build, fill, and deploy nursery trays, and how to prepare for overwintering. We also presented you with different options for overwintering your clams, and we provided an overview of how and why these suggested techniques work to enhance the success of seeding efforts. In this final video, we detail possible seeding strategies for your overwintered clams.
One of the most important aspects of a proper seeding strategy is site selection. You want to select a site that is going to have the appropriate sediment for your clams to burrow down into, as well as protection, especially if you're going to be using netting to protect your clams, which we recommend very highly. Predation is the #1 driver of clam populations, and particularly predation by the invasive green crab and the milky ribbon worm are what really control our clam populations in this state. So if you're going to take the time to invest in seed, it's really important to make a good decision on how best to either protect it or seed in an area that you're hoping has less impact due to predators. If you're using netting, keep in mind that you will need a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers to place that net on your intertidal flat. It is a free permit, but it will take many months to get this permit in your hand. So very similar to the LPA, you're going to want to apply for your Army Corps of Engineer permit in January or February so that you have it in hand in April and May when you go to seed your clams. The type of nets we use is a 4.2 millimeter extruded black plastic netting. What we do is make them 14 by 14 feet. When you buy the netting, it will come in a 14-foot roll, and you can get it up to 3,000 feet long. And we attach 5 toggles to the underside of the net to act as flotation, so that when the tide comes over top of the net, it is able to rise off the mud flat and not interfere with the bivalve feeding. These toggles can be attached to the net very simply by just using a little piece of cedar lath and 2 screws to ensure that they won't go anywhere. We like to use 5 toggles in the shape of a quincrux or a 5 on a dice cube. It gives nice even distribution to the flotation and should be really good for your net. Under each 14 by 14 foot net, we typically will seed up to 5,000 softshell clams, unless we're in an area that we think or we know is going to have very high survivorship, and then that's actually too many clams per net, because it's going to be very hard to A, dig them without breaking a lot, or B, you'll get competition among the clams and that will lead to decreased growth. When the site is selected and your permits are in hand, you can go out and seed your nets by simply taking the net, stretching it out on the mud with the toggles down so they're trapped inside of the net. Spreading this net out is much easier with 2 people as it's quite cumbersome. Once you have the net spread out on the mud flat where you'd like it, you want to secure one end of the net by walking along the net and pushing it down into the sediment with your foot. This works very well in soft sediments but does not work on firm sediments. In an area with firm sediments, you have to actually take your clam hoe and dig a trench and place the net down in the trench and then backfill the trench in. You also have to backfill the trench when you're in soft sediments just by simply taking your boot and pushing the mud into the furrow. The goal is to get 6 to 8 inches of the net vertical in the sediment so that the net stays well seated once you have seeded the net and walked away. Once that first side is in place, you want to mark a line around the net and then pull the net back so that you can broadcast your seed. You want to try and broadcast your seed as evenly as possible within the net, not getting too close to the edges where you're going to push the net down into the sediment and potentially crush or miss your clams. Once your net is properly seeded, you need to secure the other 3 sides of the net in the exact same manner that you did the first side, by either A, walking along the side in soft sediment and pressing it down into the sediment and then backfilling the furrow, or by digging a trench, placing the net down in the trench, and then backfilling. It's essential that after you've seeded your net, you come back to that net on the next low tidal cycle to check and make sure that no edges were missed, especially the corner of the net, which you want to have very well seeded. You're going to want to keep regular track of your nets, because if a storm event occurs, you may have a side or a whole net that comes up, and you'll have to either go fix or retrieve your net before the ocean takes it away from you. Another seeding strategy, if nets either are not applicable in your area, you can't get the help to put the nets in, or for one reason or another you're just not able to use netting but you want to seed clams, a viable option is to seed the clams in the high mid intertidal. You don't want them at the very high tide because it's going to be years and years and years before you can go harvest them. But if you keep them above the mid tide, predation tends to decrease. Something like a crab, which is probably your main predator, is only eating those crabs, or primarily eating those crabs, when they're underwater. So the more time those clams spend out of the water, the less predation there is going to be and the higher your survivorship. The trade-off there is the more time they spend out of water, the less time they spend feeding. So you're sacrificing growth by seeding in the upper mid-tide compared to the upper low tide if you were using a net, but it may be a strategy that works in your area and allows you to do your work without the use of a net. If you are going to choose this option, we would recommend planting more seed than you think you need in a larger area. The more you spread out your seed and the more you put out, the better you are at satiating your predators and hopefully being able to still maintain a harvestable amount of your softshell clam seed.
This concludes our Clam Kit Simple Shellfish Management Tools series. We hope you found the information in this series informative and relevant to your shellfish management efforts. If you have questions or would like additional information, please visit Downeast Institute's website or contact a staff member directly.